Well, welcome everybody to our Tech Tuesday 2025 series from Razorleaf. This is Julianne Grant, and I'm here and welcoming you today. So we're happy to kick this off. We have Milan Obradovic, who has been hosting this series for the last couple of years. And today we're going to be talking about the latest Aras Innovator platforms for versions 33 and 34. So what those upgrades look like, some dashboards, reporting, some other features. I don't want to steal his thunder. This webinar is being recorded. We'll be sharing this recording out to anyone who registered, and we encourage you to share it with your friends. And we hope to see everyone at the ACE event next week in Boston. We will be having a kiosk there, so be sure to stop by our booth if you're attending. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Milan.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Julianne. And hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Whether you've been here before, welcome back. And if you're new to the webinar, welcome to What's New from Aras. So today, what we're going to be covering is, as Julianne prefaced with, is releases 33 and 34 from Aras. So we had our little bit of a holiday break, and now we're back to it with a double release special. So just the agenda today, per usual, we'll take a look at what's new in each release. We'll have some important product updates, letting you guys know what's coming up in end of life, whether you're currently on an end of life version, and other sort of platform updates. Then we'll follow up with Q&A and a little bit of wrap up to go along with that. So to start, we have Innovator 33, some of the notable release notes that came up from this release. So first things first here, something that Aras has been pushing for the last couple releases and is still pushing for on these last two is really getting responsive forms up to the level of customization and functionality that the classic forms are. So in release 33, we got the ability to kind of specify how we want our multi-value lists to pop up, whether they're a drop-down or a checkbox. We got added controls there. Alongside that, some enhancements to the technical documentation framework. So really moving these Aras applications closer to the functionality of the genuine text editors, thinking of a Microsoft Word. So there's some key events for the Enter key, the Delete key, the backspace key that make things a little more comfortable to navigate and really make things a lot more streamlined when we're writing up these documents within Aras. Alongside that, some event updates. So there's some new server events for item types, and those are going to be the on-lock and on-unlock server events. So rather than the on-ed, on-update, we have these two new features as well to trigger your events. Alongside that, requirements engineering, kind of a lot here. So not listing things out here, but there's a new release for 33, and there's some pretty big usability upgrades. Updates to the UI, the ability to move things around while you're editing those documents. So some pretty neat things to, once again, push things closer to that basic text editor functionality that people have been looking for within Aras. There was a release for MPP to go along with release 33. No major functionality upgrade, just kind of keeping that compatibility up to date as we're starting to release new or get to new releases and new sort of background functionalities being released to support these applications. So just verifying they're still compatible. Some exciting stuff around variant management that we'll get into to demo a little bit today. So once again, a new release for 33, but it also introduces a new item type called configurator context. So there's some pretty cool features that go along with that we'll be able to poke at and dive into a bit. Now moving on to Innovator 34. So nothing as flashy as 33, but there is some important changes that are going on here in release 34. One being, further enhancements to responsive forms. So big thing here is X-Class and X-Prop support. If you guys are currently making use of those, we're actually able to make use of them on responsive forms now rather than being stuck on the classic forms. And there's a few other customization enhancements, formatting, layout, coloring, just expanding the functionality in the feature set to really make those forms exactly what you need them to be. A big change for searching and data retrieval. Aras has introduced a not operator within simple search. So allowing you to filter out everything that contains a specific set of digits could be extremely useful if you want to find every item that is not released. for example. So a lot of flexibility, added flexibility there with the not operator and simple search, along with dashboards and collaboration. So there's a few little quality of life changes that have been modified. So when it comes to the access control and the sharing of dashboards with users in the system, not only can you specify an identity that has access to that dashboard, but you're also able to specify if it is a viewer or an editor. So pretty useful functionality there. And then some ease of use things with the navigation menu. Instead of the basic edit, expand, etc., there's now a navigation menu that allows you to get to your data a lot quicker with less clicks. And then finally, some back-end infrastructure and performance enhancements alongside with some security enhancements here. There's some modifications to the conversion processes as well as workflow processes that we'll touch on for a bit on one of these slides. So first things first, what's going on with responsive forms? So as I mentioned, we got some additional formatting options for our responsive forms. So we have some more flexibility on how we will display our multi-value lists. So whether it is a multi-select checkbox or a dropdown, we have some more flexibility there rather than just using the layout that they provide. It also provides support for X class and X properties. I just had a simple classification structure here, but once I select my classification, it's going to drop down or add more fields to support all the X properties that are within that X classification, and allow that tree to grow and flex with that responsive size as responsive forms provide to you guys. There's also colored group boxes. In this example, I just gave it a little red outline, but if we wanted to highlight this, make it yellow, make it obvious that this is data that needs to be entered, you are now able to do that without any custom code to interact with the responsive forms. And then if we have a text field, for example, if we have a long description that could extend from 100 characters to 250, we can grow and shrink that field as need be to fit the text that is being entered within that form. So on to that, we have TechDoc framework and the configurable key events. So think of editing a document within Microsoft Word and the basic functionality that you get with that. So at the end of a line, if I were to press the Enter key, you'd expect a new line to be created. And that's kind of what they're introducing here. So if I were to select the Enter key at the very end of a text document element, it's going to create and append a new text document element to our document. So the same way as you're adding a new line to a Word document, that same functionality will continue here with the Enter key. The same goes with the backspace key. So if I'm at the very beginning of a document element and I have a line behind it, if I were to select backspace, it's going to take that doc element, pull it into the previous doc element, and combine the two. It's the same way as if I were to press backspace on a line in Microsoft Word, it'll pull that into the previous line and kind of continue that thread without any returns. And the delete key operates in the following direction. So if I'm at the very end of a document element and I press the delete key, it'll get rid of that return, aka that enter. That would create a new document element and pull that all into the same, or sorry, push that into the following. And that also goes with list elements. So when we're looking at tables and lists within Word or any other text editor, we would expect enter, backspace, and delete to do the things that we expect them to do when we're using a text editor, and they're just moving that functionality into Innovator. So really useful usability things that, if there's a couple gripes with TechDoc's framework in the past of, it's not really a true text editor, we're getting to that point where, it's starting to become very usable and very, text editing friendly. So following that up, we have the dashboards and collaboration. So the first thing here is role-based sharing. In the past, if we wanted to share a dashboard, yeah, we could select all the identities we wanted. If I wanted all employees to have access to that dashboard, they would have access to it, but we couldn't really specify whether they could edit that dashboard. So now, once an identity is added, we can specify that, yeah, they can access the dashboard, but they're only going to have viewer permissions. So they can't make any changes, they can't rearrange the widgets, they can't change the selected data that's being displayed on that dashboard. And That's important for maintaining that control of data and how it's being distributed around the organization. The same goes with the editor role. So while there may be some users in the system that you would want to modify that dashboard and shape it for their group. Let's say if it's a quality manager with a quality dashboard, we would want them to be able to edit that dashboard and distribute it down to their specific group within the organization. Following that, we also have a new navigation menu within widgets. So we got some enhanced navigation capabilities. It's going to lessen the number of clicks required to reach whatever data source you want. So for example, if we have a grid widget that's showing me a list of all of our parts or a specific in-basket task, I could go to the new navigation menu, select open in tab, and get right to the in-basket. While in the past, we could access those individual items displayed in the widget. We couldn't navigate to the full-fledged grid without actually going into the table of contents, opening up that tab, selecting in basket, and opening it from there. This gives you a one-stop shop to get to really everything you need. And in the same way as, and it still maintains the previous functionality of refreshing, maximizing the widget. And if you're a dashboard editor, you can access the widget settings and sort of change the context and shape and all of those administrative tasks that go along with a widget. All right, so this is quite a bit of text, but we're going to get through point by point here. So when it comes to infrastructure and performance, there's a few modifications to the conversion process. So one, a pretty useful tool to lessen the load of your Vault server and where you're storing your files. Administrators can now define custom locations for temporary files that are being used in the conversion process. So instead of having a bunch of temporary files weighing down on your main server, we can push those off to another location to ensure that one, we're not bogging down with a bunch of transactions. On our main server, we could push that off to another one and keep the conversion processes flowing without any delays. There's also a new execution model for conversion processes known as the fire and forget execution model. It's going to enhance our system reliability when handling these long-running tasks. So instead of the conversion server seeing all of the tasks and running down each one, we can now submit these tasks asynchronously, and then the system will deliver notifications upon completion of those individual tasks. Alongside this, we have a new workflow process identity. So all workflow operations are now going to be executed under a dedicated system identity. So this is going to make sure that once a workflow is kicked off, we're not going to be able to have workflow manipulations once that process is being executed. So if there's, if some of you in the past are allowing specific roles to maybe modify assignments or modify what task is coming next while a workflow is currently in process, this new change is going to sort of lock that down, make sure that we're following those processes as they're defined, and make sure that we're not interrupting any of those flows or making unneeded modifications there. So following that up, there's also a new expanded security control here. Is there's a specific permission that we can set on properties on our item types. So basically, if a user has discover access for an item, in the past they could, every item property there could sort of be accessible or discoverable through that item. So if I had discover access on all the parts in a environment, but I didn't have discover access for something that was referenced as an item property, I could still see that that data exists. Now this allows for admins to define which properties can be viewed when that user only has discover access for an item. So it's just an extension of the current Aras security model to really prevent any users from seeing data that they shouldn't be. Then finally, we have the not operator for simple search. So, those of you who are well-versed in programming languages, the not operator is usually an exclamation point. That's now a option in simple search. So if I wanted to search for everything that was not released or is excluding the part number 456, I could add that into my search grid and it'll filter out any entries not containing the data that I referenced. So there may be some modifications needed for saved searches to support this. If you've found some workaround to create a not operator or wrote some custom searches through AML, this makes it a lot simpler, and we'll provide that functionality without any custom AML writing and so on. So a nice, new, and neat way to find your data. All right, so next we have requirements engineering. So as I said, there's quite a bit of things here that that couldn't really fit on that first slide. So to begin, we have the ability to drag and drop document elements, and don't worry, I'll poke at these things a little bit in a live demonstration. But so as we look through our requirement tree, if I wanted to reorder those document elements, say maybe move a requirement ahead of another, or take a block of text and move it into another requirement, and so on, that is all now possible, and something that really allows for extended flexibility to really, when it comes to requirements documents, to make sure that the document structure makes sense, make sure that things are going in the right order. If something needs to be somewhere else, it really makes it easy to modify that without having to go into the individual requirement, take those elements, move them to another one. This just makes that editing process a lot simpler. Another thing that was added is a spell check. So you might notice there's a few misspelled words in this block of text. That is an item that you can toggle on and off. But when that is toggled on, it'll let you know if there's any spelling errors and help with review and proofreading of these documents. Another item that is added is link management within editors. If we wanted to link an external URL or link external or link other requirements to requirements, there's a framework in place now to allow that to happen. Search and replace is something that we're showing on the screen here. So if I were to look for anywhere that the word document is included in this requirements document, I can then find it and replace it with the pre-specified text that I would like. So once again, trending towards the more full-fledged text editor functionality that will really take these products to where people want them to go. So the next thing here is save as. So if I were to take a requirement or requirements document, we have a save as functionality to sort of reuse the structure, all the text, etc. So if I had a requirement that really used 90% of another requirements document, I can use that as a starting point and then go create another requirements document based off of that. Hiding the chapter tree is really just a usability feature. So, if I were to click this arrow here, it would expand the chapter tree. I can see all of the individual document elements as we break down. So just, if we're really looking at this to view, we can hide that tree and, just give ourselves more screen space to read. And then finally, a new publishing format. So previously, we were able to publish requirements documents to PDF and HTML. This new release has added support for XML. So nice, neat new feature there. All right, on to variant management. So this might be a little wordy in the explanation. In my experience, getting to work with the configurator context item type really made things a little more defined here. So really the configurator context item type allows for the handling of past, present, and future product variants. So when I'm setting up a configurator context item, I can select the applicable features and options that are applicable to the scope of work that is defined. So really to expand on that, if I have a branching product line, say I have 3 different types of robots. I have an assembly robot, a welding robot, and a palletizing robot. I could specify a configurator context for an assembly robot and only put the options that apply to an assembly robot on the configurator tree. So this just keeps things a lot simpler for our users working with these subconfigurators. If we really only want to build an assembly robot, we're going to hide all the options for a welding or palletizing robot and make the context a lot more clear for a user. And just to express this and show it and really make it make a little more sense for you guys, I have a little bit of a demo I want to show for you right here. So we'll be heading to our Innovator environment and be taking a look at this variability item. So this variability item is containing the context for our R series of robots. And it's going to contain our RS, which is for sealing and assembly. We have our RW for welding and our RP for palletizing. So for a user, if I wanted to go and do a context or do a configuration for an assembly robot, I could go through and say I want assembly, it's going to be an RS, the destination region is Europe, and I can go through all of our specific options. But there's a good chance that some of these options, for example, a welding end effector, is not going to really apply for an assembly robot. So in that case, we have the ability to go and define specific context for a configurator. So for example, we'll use the assembly option here and open up our context editor. So this is using the same base variability item, so VIA, the one we're just taking a look at. But within that variability structure, we're going to be able to select specific items that are going to be applicable in this context. So if we want an assembly or sealing robot, we can say that our only options that make sense here are going to be assembly sealing, RS, the specific region. If certain products are only provided in Europe or Japan, we can specify those as well, and kind of go down this assembly structure and limit the context to really what makes sense for this product. So if we go through and take a look at our context options, it's going to look and feel the same as we're configuring a product and trying to get to that single resolve structure. So I can select all the specific options that I want for a assembly or sealing robot. I can select the robotic arms that are applicable here, the proper usage, the payload, the reach, repeatability, etc., and go through all of these individual options that make sense for this specific series of robot. So if we were to take a look at the welding or the palletizing robot, those options that we're selecting as our contextually accurate options are all going to change based off of our selection. So now if we were to go to our breakdown item and try to get a resolved structure from the R series, I could go through and do my resolution with no context, and say, yeah, this is an assembly robot, I want RS, etc. But if this is a pretty complex product structure and we want to make sure we're limiting our options to the specific context we want, I'm going to go ahead and say, this is a welding robot. Immediately, it's going to reduce the number of options that we have available to us based off of those contextual selections we made in the past. So now we only see welding, RW, we got our region, our specific payloads are limited based off of what we provide with that specific product. And then our end effector, we only have the welding one. We don't really have the ability to select anything else because this is a welding series robot. We go down our options, save. We can go ahead and resolve a specific structure for a specific welding robot. So that context is carried on. So if I wanted to maybe say I want an RS, our options are going to be removed. We can't, if we have the context of a assembly or sealing robot, we're not going to be able to use those options for a welding robot. So that's going to clear out all of those options that would make sense for a welding robot because they're not within this specific context. So I can go through, say I want an assembling robot. I can use my 3-finger gripper, select my options and go through, and I then can resolve for an assembling robot. So it's just really speeding up the configuration process for our end users, making sure that there's a limited option, there's less decision points, and we can further define our product variability. So another key point to make with the configurator context is that when I set the variability item, it will maintain that specific revision of the variability item. So if I wanted to take a look at past product variability structures, I could have a context for Rev A and set that. So say if there's a lot of custom work and we know that Rev A is going to be the best starting point for this custom, we could select our configurator context for Rev A of VIA, and go through and set that within our initial configurator. All right, so alongside that, I did say we're going to poke at a bit of requirements management. So let's go take a look. So first things first, we're going to take a look at our basic Aras demo requirements doc here. So, pretty familiar context for a lot of you who have been through Aras-led demonstrations. So a few things have changed probably since the last time we talked about requirements management within what's new in Aras here. So first things first, you may notice that an individual requirement is no longer required or needed to maintain kind of a title of this document. In the past, we used to have a Rec 1 that was specifically the title page of this document. In this case, that's now just a document element. We have a title block saying this is the overview of our 3D printer. Alongside that, going back to the feature set that we talked of on the slides, we also now have the ability to kind of move things around and be a little flexible where items are being placed on this requirement. So while we're in the scope of a requirements document, I can take this text element that is within requirement 2 and I can move it elsewhere. So while it's supposed to be part of requirement 2, maybe this block of text for requirement 2 makes sense in either in a different requirement, either it should be living individually on the requirement document, etc. And you'll see as I start to drag and drop things around, whatever requirement is being edited is going to then be marked with the classic Aras edit logo. So for example, if this printer connectivity requirement really makes more sense outside of that requirement, we can modify the context of our requirements document to be structured a little bit differently. I'm going to quickly discard those changes. So another thing here is, maybe we need to go ahead and find some issues here. So one thing I already noticed in this document is, there's a few places where, an apostrophe doesn't seem to be showing up right. There's a bit of an error there. So if I went and found question mark S, and I want to replace it with this. So we're going to find every instance of document and replace it with. My apologies, I'm a little bug here. Either way, so as we go through, we can find all the specific instances, same way as we're going through any other document editor of that word. So maybe we want to find everywhere that 3D print is referenced, and go ahead and find that as I'm viewing the document. I can go ahead and skip through our instances there. There we go. All right, so alongside that, there's a few other pieces of functionality that were added. We have the ability to save as requirements documents now. So now I can create a new requirements document based off of that initial 3D printer product specification. It's going to auto number it to a new number. I can say this is 3D document specification V2, and go in, make all those modifications as needed, add new requirements, and just really use that base requirement item as our template for future requirements as we move forward. So at that point, that really concludes most of what the demonstration that I wanted to show for you guys today is. So at this point, we can head back to the deck and go through some of our other important product updates. So those of you that have been attending, some of this is a bit repetitive at this point, but for new attendees, I like to kind of keep some of these end of life dates up here for a while, just to make sure that everyone's getting the information they need. So for end of life, obviously every release that is 12SP18 or older, so if you're still using 12, 11, those were set to end of life at January 2024, alongside release 14, 15, and 16 those are all end of life as of July 2024 as well. So if you are currently running one of those releases, you're currently running an unsupported version of Aras. So feel free to reach out to either, if you're working with Razorleaf, reach out to us, reach out to Aras, get into that upgrade queue and make sure that we're moving forward and getting to a supported version of Aras. So coming soon, a big chunk of releases were all kind of set together to be end of life in June 2025. So that is releases 17 through 25. So a good amount of users are probably on this range of release. So once again, make sure you're reaching out to Aras, reaching out to support, getting into the upgrade queue, and starting to have those conversations. While post 14, there are self-service upgrades. It's always a good idea to have someone alongside you, your service partner, Aras themselves, and they can help walk you through that upgrade process, as well as make any necessary modifications to the patch in order to apply that to your environment. Alongside that, we have some platform spec updates. These came into effect as of Innovator 32, but SQL Server 2012 and 2014 are now deprecated with the release of Innovator 32. So alongside that, there's some backend framework updates that are kind of requirements for now requirements to run Innovator. So, if you got used to installing 6.0.6 as I have in the past, you're now going to need to install .NET Hosting Bundle 8.0.1 in order to have Innovator run correctly. So if you are looking at upgrade with these releases now reaching end of life, make sure that you're taking this into account before you move to the new version of Aras. Get these backend components upgraded and installed to make sure that that upgrade goes off without a hitch. And alongside this, this is a topic that's been coming up, but self-service reporting is now in its end of life stage and is no longer included with the new releases of Aras. So Aras Labs released a tool that allows you to export your self-service reports as SQL queries and then import them as query definitions. So, as you're going through your upgrade process and you're starting to take a look at this, make sure you export all of your self-service reports before upgrading, so you don't have to go ahead and rebuild all of those reports that you're currently making a use of. So that link below is, or really above what I just read, that link right there is going to take you to the GitHub location where you can download that tool and start making use of that to, at least start to test out the new reporting application with your existing SSRs. All right, so with that, that'll bring us to Q&A. So feel free to fire away.
Thank you, Milan. We do have one question from Angela. Any news regarding the next open release?
So nothing at the moment, but ACE is coming up this next week, and that's usually a question I always toss into their Aras at the round, or Aras in the round conversation. So I'll make sure I get that answered, or at least get it on the table for them to get an answer to us over the next week.
Okay, great. And if anyone has any questions, please just pop them in the question section. I do have another one for you, Milan. Are there any concerns around existing workflow processes being altered due to the change in process identity?
I don't believe so. So taking a look at the new releases and looking at the out-of-the-box workflows that are provided, it's not really modifying things like the lifecycle map, where it's pretty reliant on the Aras PLM identity to do those transitions. I think it's really more of a security consideration. So as those workflow processes are kicked off, if you're currently modifying them while they're active, there may be some modifications you need to add users to a specific identity to allow them to manage that workflow. But for the most part, if you're using a relatively out-of-the-box workflow, you should be able to transition to this new release without many hiccups.
Okay, thank you. One more question from Angela. What about the new Edge service that was just announced?
So with the Edge service, we don't have much context yet on that. I know, once again, this is a pretty big topic at ACE that they're going to be having a session on. So following the conference, I'll have a lot more insight around Innovator Edge, and we will be able to get that information incorporated into our next webinar.
Okay, great. And I have one more. What kind of flexibility is there around the conversion server execution mode?
Yeah, so this is something that has come up with us when working with customers moving to new releases post upgrade. If the conversion server execution model changes up, there might be some issues with executing tasks in the right order. Things might be getting stuck. So in order to maintain compatibility, the new release of Aras provides the option to either use the new execution model or specify that we want to still do conversion in the old method before this new modification. So if you're seeing issues with the new execution model, there's always a way to revert back to a previous release model.
Okay, great. We do have another one. Do you know if there are any new training manuals available? There are a lot of updates regarding the property permissions.
I haven't been through any recent Aras training, so specifically configuring solutions would probably be covering that. That's something I could pose to the Aras team, going through the training sessions and reach out, or yeah, I think that'd be the best bet. Is I'll have to take a look at the training manuals and see if they've been updated with the new property permissions. If not, I'll make sure to make a note of that and get that on the a specific talking point at the conference.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions coming in. If anyone has anything additional, you can always reach out to us and we will answer you privately. But
Yep.
I think with that, Milan, you can close.
All right, awesome. So as I have mentioned a few times, the Aras ACE event is going to be happening from March 31st to April 3rd in Boston, Massachusetts. So like I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of new content related to things that we mentioned here on this webinar, as well as things like Innovator Edge and other new applications that are going to be on the roadmap or releasing soon. So if you are able to attend ACE, and if you're going to be there, be excited to hopefully meet some of you guys from the attendance. You can meet the face of what's new in Aras Live. And if not, they always make sure that they will release any new training materials and some of the presentations on the Aras subscriber portal for you guys to catch up. So hopefully to see you guys there. If not, we'll definitely have some content related to what was introduced at ACE, as we usually do. And as we always are, we're always keeping up with what's the newest applications and what's being released at all times. So once again, hope to see you there. If not, we'll make sure we fill you guys in and make sure we're not missing anything, or you guys aren't missing anything that's been mentioned or released at the ACE event. So if you are a Razorleaf subscriber, we'll be having our annual customer dinner there. So if you haven't gotten an invite to that, feel free to reach out to Julianne or Maggie, and they can ensure that you received your invitation. All right, with that, once again, thank you all for attending this. Looking forward to a great rest of the year with Tech Tuesday. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.